Imagine coming into work one day and you hear an announcement like this: we're restructuring the department. We're shifting our priorities. We're adjusting our strategy. And everyone asks the same question: why? Maybe the organization was doing fine. Your team was performing well. Nothing inside of the organization seemed to be going wrong. So, where did this change come from? Very often, the answer is that the change was propelled from outside of the organization. Sociologists call this the organizational environment. The organizational environment refers to external forces that shape what's happening inside of the workplace. Once you understand this idea, a lot of workplace decisions will start to make a little bit more sense. Organizations don't operate in isolation. They exist inside a large environment of economic trends, population factors, political trends, current events. So you can think of the organization as sitting inside of all of those other components. And let me draw the full diagram for you here. All right, so we'll go through each of these external factors that shape what happens within the organization itself. So I started with economic trends, so let's build on that one for a bit. And as I'm discussing this, you'll recognize a lot of these things pretty quickly. So, at least in the US, but I'm sure this happens all over the world, there are points where inflation happens, prices increase, gas prices, grocery prices. Those prices could increase due to conflicts and wars abroad. It could happen when a major industry collapses. And we, can see those examples of this readily today. With all of the different conflicts that the U.S. government, U.S. military is involved in, we are seeing currently, in the time that I'm filming this video, we're seeing gas prices skyrocket. Grocery prices have been increasing for months now, if not for over a year. But gas prices in particular have recently increased, and I would name that specifically due to the conflict or war happening between the U.S., Israel, and Iran. So those kinds of economic trends are not just purely economic, they're also political, right? Because they're governmental forces that are involved and initiate the economic patterns. And so one thing that I like to refer to when I'm speaking about political and economic circumstances is I refer to it as the geopolitical environment. geographical location, politics, and economy really intersect almost all the time, and they're each really important. So what does that mean for workplaces? What does that mean for corporations and businesses? Well, it means that they will also have to adapt to that because it's putting strain on the workers themselves. And the ways that they might adapt, maybe to decreases in their budget, could be a result of this. Ways that they might adapt might be hiring freezes. Expansion plans that were in place are suddenly paused. From the perspective of employees inside the organization, this can really seem confusing, like it might seem like it came out of nowhere. But once you understand that these economic patterns and what's happening in the economic realm of society is shaping what's happening within the organization, then it starts to make sense. Now I want you to imagine a different scenario where a government passes a new law or regulation that affects a particular industry. Again, not something that we have to draw too heavily from our imagination to understand. And so one example of that could be the restrictions on DEI happening currently, diversity, equity, inclusion. A lot of schools, colleges, and universities in particular have swiftly changed their policies, their funding efforts, their committee and task force efforts around DEI due to the legislation that came out of the Trump presidency. So organizations adapt in response to government policies and legal changes as well. And so you might be able to see the ways that particular types of legislation that have come out of different presidencies or major institutions in society, especially governmental, directly impact what's happening in your workplace. And so I want to move on to population changes and trends, because population can affect everything from hiring to long-term strategy. We live in a world where people are in transit quite often, moving from place to place, traveling from place to place. Much of the time, a lot of that movement is due to work or wanting to enhance their economic position in some way. And so, immigration is a major factor that we can draw from in that regard. And we're sort of in an immigration crisis now. It was once thought of that if you move out of your country that is stalling or suffering economically and just go to the US or go to the Western world, then you'll have better options for work and things like that. And that's just not the case anymore. And actually there's a lot of policies that have restricted the ability of people to come from other parts of the world, particularly the global south, some parts of Asia currently, the Caribbean in particular. These are places where it's not as easy to come to the US than it would be if you lived in, another part of North America or Europe. And so you can look at the governmental policies around immigration and see very distinct patterns. And you can also look at how immigrants shape our workforce. And I know that the media talks a lot about illegal immigration, but when you look at labor data, which I've studied, there's actually a video on my channel where I look at jobs that people of color hold. The major emphasis was on Black employees, but I also looked at other marginalized racial ethnic groups. And of course, people that were born in other countries make up a huge part of the labor force who are here legally with their, have legal status in the US or, green cards and things like that. They make up a huge part of the labor force. And some of them are doing quite well in the labor force, better than some folks that were born in this country, actually. And so we've actually seen that places like, I use the example of universities and colleges actually recruit professors and teachers and sometimes staff, different types of staff from other countries, because they want those particular skills that they have. In my town, there's a big university that directly recruits from China. Okay? So you can think about an aging population, which the U.S. is, one of the countries in the world that has a very high percentage of aging individuals, those over the age of 60. If we look at many countries within Africa, it's the exact opposite, where most of the population is under the age of 30. So those kinds of population trends directly impact the kinds of services and industries that operate in that place. And so in the US, with a large population of people over the age of 65, there's a lot of attention paid to the healthcare industry in particular, right? So that even when, unemployment rates have been high, and industries have struggled, healthcare has been one that's been, going pretty strong in the U.S. And a lot of that is related to the caretaking of older individuals, not necessarily because they're all in bad health, but that they may need additional types of care and services once you reach, that age. Whereas if you think of a place like Ghana, where there's a very large population under the age of 30, then there needs to be a lot more investment in educational institutions, right? Social services as well. So organizations are constantly studying population patterns because those patterns influence, current trends. Sometimes major events also reshape organizations, and this could happen overnight. Maybe it's a technological breakthrough. AI, hello? Okay, let's look at the ways that artificial intelligence is rapidly changing the landscape of work in so many different ways. It's impacting every single industry right now, and it's going to continue to do that. So that's not a current trend that we can ignore. And it's more than an event. It's it's something that's been introduced, expanded upon in a very major and significant way. But it is current. It's like a hot topic, in our culture today. So these are things that we have to pay a lot of attention to, because they're also going to impact our work and how we lead, if that's our position, our companies, our organizations. Okay? So in education, for example, this is a major conversation where we're trying to figure out different AI policies for courses, a kind of universal college-wide policy for AI use. Different teachers are experimenting with different things. Some are, not interested at all, and so they're adapting different ways to manage AI use by students. But it's not a current event that we can ignore at all, right? You can also think about, if new programs are launched or, new innovations come about, all of these things, tend to shape our organizations. And then the last thing that I want to talk about is other organizations. Other organizations. So again, organizations do not operate in isolation. They are part of a larger sphere of influence. And so sometimes it's other organizations, and they're not necessarily competing organizations all the time. They might just be similar organizations. Think about how many fast food restaurants there are, how many colleges and restaurants there are, how many retail shops and companies there are. And so in a sense there is, especially in a capitalist society, there is a sense of competition among these organizations, where everyone's looking at the prices that different companies are offering, the consumer base, the rates of spending by particular groups, and all of those sorts of things. And so they definitely influence the operations of your particular entity as well, your particular organization as well. Okay? And I think there's something else I wanted to say about Other organizations, yeah, I think it's a network really, when we're thinking about other organizations, because there's many. I think about actually this concept of McDonaldization that I teach my classes, and you can kind of look this up on your own. It's a concept that came about with the work of George Ritzer. Sociologist George Ritzer wrote a book called The McDonaldization of Society. And he talks about how not only other restaurants adapted McDonald's techniques and their business practices and even the way that they structured their restaurants and products, but other organizations in general started to take on that model. So now you have terms like mixed schools, mixed houses, and those sorts of things to indicate the way that the McDonald's structure or business model has shaped how other organizations operate. And I bet you could see aspects of that in your own organization, company, or business. The principles of McDonaldization include things like efficiency, control, calculability. So those are things that you can identify, I'm sure, within your own organization. So, if you enjoy learning about how organizations really work, definitely subscribe to my channel. This is Class with Prof. Eve, where we connect sociology to everyday life. And I'd love to hear from you. What external forces are shaping your work environment? Let me know in the comments below. All right? And I will see you all in my next video.